Welcome to the Women at the Top podcast interview series. My name is Regina Barr, and I am so excited to be here with all of you today. I'm the founder of the Women at the Top network, and of course, I will be your host. For those of you who don't know us, Women at the Top is a community of like-minded women who share the WAT vision and mission. And simply put, our goal is to empower aspiring women to lead. And we do this in a couple of ways. We provide training, information, and connections. I'm so excited that joining me today is Kathy Caprino, author of The Most Powerful You, 7 Bravery Boosting Paths to Career Bliss. And before we get started, I want to tell you just a little bit about Kathy. Kathy has an MA, is an international career and leadership coach, writer, speaker, and executive trainer helping professional women rise, thrive, and reach their highest, most rewarding potential. I love that. She is a former corporate VP. She is also a trained therapist, seasoned executive coach, senior Forbes contributor, top media source on women's issues, and the author of 2 books, including her latest, The Most Powerful You, 7 Bravery Boosting Paths to Career Bliss. With her top-rated Finding Brave podcast, books, assessments, coaching programs, courses, and other key resources, Kathy has been named a top career coach and leadership voice in the U.S. and abroad. On that note, I want to welcome you to our podcast today, Kathy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Regina. I'm thrilled to be here. So thrilled.
It's really exciting. And you and I were talking before we went live that we've had the opportunity to chat in the past. And so we're really excited to have you back again and talking about your latest book. So I'm going to go. Yes, absolutely. So I'm very inspired by your book description, Inspire Women to Take Action, Find, Brave, and Connect with Greater Power. Wow, that is very powerful just in and of itself. I also have a similar motto, if you will, of think big, take action, and make it happen. So with that, I'd love to hear the backstory on your book. So what inspired you to write this book now?
Thank you for sharing that. All right. So it started about 5 years ago. So I just need to give a little context. You mentioned it, but I did have an 18-year corporate career 20 years ago. And on the outside, it was successful. On the inside, it wasn't. And I faced bumps. And those bumps turned into full-blown crises. So I give this as a context. Those crises were sexual harassment, gender bias, gender discrimination, toxic colleagues, narcissistic bosses, chronic illness, zero work-life balance. My kids were little then. They're 29 and 26. And I wasn't in the fabric of their lives, right? But worse than all of that was waking up saying, is this really what I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life? Because it lacked contributive meaning. I share that story because I was truly stuck for many, many, many years. And I didn't understand what was going on and how it happened. And I didn't understand what I know now. And long story short, after 9/11, I was laid off, and it led me to transform, and I became a marriage and family therapist. And now I've been doing this kind of coaching, career and leadership coaching for mid to high level professional women for 16 years. About 5 years ago, I was so floored by something, Regina, which is this.
Okay.
No matter where my clients were calling in from, so, I've worked across 6 continents. No matter what level, no matter how much money they had in the bank, no matter what industry, no matter their education, they were bringing the same kinds of challenges over and over and over and over and over. So I decided to answer 2 questions by spending about 6 months looking at what our conversations were talking about and where we were going in coaching. And those questions were, what is missing in their lives and work that they are coming for help? Mm-hmm. But number 2, what are they getting specifically from, I would say, my brand of coaching that led to breakthroughs? So breakthrough is my happiest word in the English language, frankly, along with power and along with finding brave. But I'm always looking for not just limping along, getting a little better, but really breakthrough. So in looking at the data, what I saw was this. They are missing 2 huge things. And I don't mean all women, and I'm not painting all men with the same brush or all women, but there's a reason we are missing these things. Number 1 is the bravery to face head on what is not working and take accountability to change what can be changed. But that's not enough, as we know, Regina.
Mm-hmm.
What they were also missing was power. And by that, I mean not the power over, but the power to be your own change agent, to be the author of your own life, and to act with influence and authority. So then I said, well, let's figure this out. What do we really
Mm-hmm.
mean? And the power piece then got dissected into what I believe and see are the 7 damaging power gaps. And
So let's talk a little bit about that,
yeah,
because your book does go in and describes power gaps, and you do talk a little bit about how it's harder for women to access internal and external power. And just in general, and again, like yourself, we're not painting a broad brush, but I think the concept of power is difficult, or even the word power is difficult for a lot of folks, especially women. So you describe that there are 7 damaging power gaps. Tell us about that and how this affects the career and advancement of women, because that's really a fascinating
thank you. And you are
topic.
so right. What I didn't know when I wrote this book is women literally shun power. They want
Mhm.
impact, they want influence, but they say to me they don't want power. And I say to them, you can't have influence and you can't have impact without power. But we know why women shun it, because we've been on the receiving end of harsh, damaging, abusive, mistreatment that looks like power, that is power. So the 7 power gaps, you asked me about those, right? I'm talking and
Hmm.
I'm forgetting. Okay.
Yes, no worries. I'll
So
help you out.
thank you. Wow, my sinus infection is killing me. Let me run through them quickly and give you the percentage of women who filled out my survey and said they have the gap. So
Okay.
1,400 women I've assessed in this survey said, they're 98% have at least one of these gaps and 75% have 3 or more. And I can tell you, if you have 3 or more, you
Wow.
cannot thrive in the working world. You won't. So, number 1 is not recognizing your special talents, abilities, and accomplishments. 63% said I have it. Number 2 is communicating from fear, not strength. 70% say yes.
Wow.
Number 3 is reluctance to ask for what I want and deserve. 77%. And there's so much to talk about what happens when we have these gaps. But if you can't ask for what you want and deserve from the beginning of your career on, you're way behind in every possible way in your own potential, Number 4 is isolating from influential support, 71%. And I'd love to talk more about all of these. Number 5 is acquiescing instead of saying stop to mistreatment. And that's mistreatment towards you and towards other people that you're seeing. 48% said yes, it's more than that. They just, I think, don't want to admit it in a survey.
Hmm. That's hard. Yep.
That's hard. Number 6 is losing sight of the thrilling dream you had for your life. 76%. My goodness. Finally, number 7 is allowing the past and negative things that have happened in the past to continue to shape and define you. 62% say yes. But in coaching people and having them fill out my career path assessment, which is 11 pages of questions I wish someone had asked me, I see that it's much more than that. The thing is, we don't know that we're letting what has happened in the past continue to shape us. We're not aware of it. So there they are.
We could be sad about, you know, the survey results that you're talking about, or I like the fact that you've named them. And then naming them and understanding what they are, I think, is half the battle, right? About working as women to overcome some of these. So I love
Right.
that you were able to pull that out of the women that you're working with so that you could share it with a much broader audience.
Thank you for that. And, as a therapist, I learned greater awareness equals greater choice. You simply can't change what you're not aware of.
Mhm.
So I love the way you frame that. It's naming the challenge and it's bringing it forward into your awareness.
Mhm.
I've always said this, insight is great, but insight doesn't change our lives. It's action unlike anything you've ever taken before. That's what will change your life. So we need both of those things. We need the insight and the awareness, but then we need the choice and the action too.
I concur with that. And I think that's a great segue to my next question for you. In your book, In the Most Powerful You, you also talk about 7 bravery boosting paths. And I think these paths are what are moving women towards that action that you're talking about. So,
That's
how
right.
do these help women experience more power and the ability to take the reins on their careers and ultimately their future?
I love these questions. So, briefly, the brave pathways, they're the antidote to the gaps, right? So they're brave sight, brave speak, brave ask, brave connection, brave challenge, brave service, and brave healing. So a lot of people ask me, well, where do I even begin? I have 5 of these gaps. So if I could, I'll just give a few of the
Hmm.
strategies of the many that are in the book. But these will, I think, move you forward, even if you're not even sure where to begin. And the
Hmm.
first one is brave sight. It's seeing yourself bravely. And I know you see this every day, Regina, in the work you do. I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I have a big following there, and I'm on hours a day. I literally can see more about someone's career in 3 minutes than they often know about themselves. What do I mean by that? I can see when they're hiding. They don't have an image. They don't have a photo. Their headline is their job title. Never do that. You are more than any job you have. And there's a formula I give in the book about, how to write that. They don't have an about section that's fleshed out. They don't have what their accomplishments are. They don't talk about their passions. They don't have recommendations. They're hiding. And why is that? Who cares? I care because 900 million people are on LinkedIn, and it is, I call it the great cocktail party in the sky. This is where you
Hmm.
can meet the most inspiring people in the world. This is where we can follow you and your podcast and
Hmm.
share what you have. It's amazing what it can do. It has been a life changer for me, a game changer. But what I want everyone who's listening to think about is, do you recognize your special talents? And do you speak about them? So one exercise I love to give is from my TEDx talk, Time to Brave Up. And it's identifying the 20 facts of you. And that term is very specific for a reason. I want you to think about the 20 accomplishments or outcomes that you've created that you are most proud of in the world. I want you to look at how you did that accomplishment, what skills you have, and the amalgam of skills that is unlike anyone else on the planet. We don't recognize that. We are like our thumbprint. We're
Hmm.
literally like no one else because of the trials and tribulations and the learning and our ancestry and our familial training, family and culture, and the devastating things that we've overcome. You are unlike anyone else. But if you don't understand that specific lens and how that lens shapes your accomplishments and who you are, so much opportunity and so much passion-filled work is just not going to be possible for you. So sit down and write those 20 accomplishments and think of them as facts. The other thing
Hmm.
is women say to me, I'm not sure what I did, or yes, I did that, but I don't want to put it on LinkedIn. I'm afraid someone's going to say I didn't do it. So I say, did you do it or did you not do it? And they'll say, well, I did it, but I had a little help. I said, of course you did.
Everybody has help.
None of us do amazing things without help. But what part so yes, your team innovated 15, amazing new products. What part did you play? Was it the strategic vision, the strategic leadership? Was it the mentorship?
Hmm.
So it's time, people. And
Yes.
if men are listening, it's time for you to do this as well. Men are naturally a little better at this, not all men,
Hmm.
because of their training, because of our societal training. And this is the final part of it. The reason women have all these gaps is we're trained to have these gaps. We didn't come out of the chute like this. We're trained to have that feminine, we live in a patriarchal world. So we split ourselves in half, feminine and masculine. And feminine is soft, pleasing, malleable. You're not too confident. You're not assertive. You put other people first. That's all well and good, except it holds us back.
Hmm.
It holds us back.
It sure does. It's frustrating sometimes when working with women or when I see a woman who is clearly beyond competent, and yet all of the things you're talking about, they don't have the confidence to step into their power and really focus on their passions. And you talked about
Right.
getting not only what you need or want, but what you deserve. So I love how you have this assessment. I took some notes, that's why I'm looking down over here, where you're asking people to talk about 20 facts of you, because that is incredibly hard for most people, but especially hard for women. And I like how you said focus on the facts, because I often tell women if it's facts, FACTS, it's not brag, BRAG, because a lot of women also feel like they start to step into that bragging mode, which they should step into the bragging mode. I'm just going to put that out there. But I get that if you can't brag about yourself, at least just state the facts about yourself. So, ladies and gentlemen, because we may have some folks of our male counterpart listening in or watching today, that's a great place to start, and a very actionable item is to focus on those 12 facts of you. So thank you, Kathy, for sharing with
Thank
us
you,
today.
Regina. Thank you. And I do want to talk one more second about, if we have time, that brag versus speaking facts. I don't feel it's bragging, so I want to give one example. If someone says, Kathy, why should we work with you? There's a lot of coaches in the world who support women. I say these 4 things. I had an 18-year corporate career, so I've lived the challenges. I'm not just sitting here in my jammies thinking about them, I
Mm-hmm.
lived them. Number 2, I became a therapist. So in my work in coaching, and this is a bugaboo for me, I go deep and we'll talk about your past and your childhood. And so many trained coaches have said, oh no, we're trained that coaching should never talk about the past. That is nonsense to me, because you are what your childhood taught you to be. And I'm not saying I give you therapy. I will refer you out when therapy is called for. But if
Mm-hmm.
we can't talk about what happened in childhood and the messages you received, we're missing an enormous part of the picture. Number 3, 16 years I've focused on women's issues and written 2 books about them. And I feel I know them more than most people on the planet, present company accepted. But mostly because I've lived them all, right? And
Mm-hmm.
number 4, I have my own business, as you do. So
Mm-hmm.
we're in the arena. I'm in the arena, having to do the very things I'm coaching other people. So I would ask people listening, does that sound like bragging?
No, I
Because
think
I
you've
don't
laid out the
feel
case.
it's just facts. And what I
Yes.
love about facts is either people are going to love that or hate it. They're going to go, well, we don't need that. I don't want to go deep.
Right.
Well,
And
then
if
I'm not
if
the coach for you. It's easy.
exactly. If those facts are not what support your vision of what you're looking for, great, move on, because then that leaves the doorway open for you to surround yourself with the people or the clients or the employees, work colleagues, whatever, that do
That's it.
want
It's
someone
a
that
filter,
exhibits
isn't
those.
it? It's a
Yes.
filter. If you don't like that, I probably won't love working with you either.
And
So,
so
right?
nice to meet you. Moving on to the next one, right?
Yeah.
That's
So
kind of how
please,
you have to be. Yes.
that's it. And please don't see that as bragging. It's stating
No.
facts.
Mhm. I completely agree with you on that 100%.
Thanks, Regina.
So we talked a little bit about the survey earlier, and that was quite a sample that you had 1,400 women taking
Right.
that survey. And your book also draws on findings that you've had from over 10 years of other research, coaching, training, and not just thousands of women here in the US, but around the world. So what did you notice was common to virtually all of them that you've either coached or counseled? What was like 1 or 2 things that came up over and over again? Or what did you find most surprising? Something in that vein.
Yeah, what a question. I love it. Um, I think the very first piece is that there are specific cultures of women who struggle with this more deeply. And I've said it a million times, and they all say it to me. And it's Asian women, Indian women, Jewish women sometimes, where there's a cultural focus on being the best, on I call it perfectionism, but it can turn into perfectionistic overfunctioning where you're trying to do more than is healthy, appropriate, and necessary. And I'm not saying all cultures do this or those cultures that I mentioned, but every Asian woman I've ever worked with and every Indian woman I've ever worked with. And, I'm Greek and Italian, and there was some of that in my own upbringing. And it was, it's often not intentional. Like my parents died at 93 and 98, and mom just passed at 98 in March. They were the staunchest supporters, and there were things that were done that held me back. For instance, dad would look at my grades, all A's and an A minus maybe, and he'd say, okay, good, but what happened here with the A minus? Well, there are messages, and they're well-meaning, but these messages can get through that that's not good enough. It has to be perfect, and it always has to be perfect. There are damaging problems to that. And I see it in midlife.
Yes.
Regina.
And that's where it comes out. I often, I had a great childhood. I love my mom to death, and I'm very close to her. She was a single working mom, but I also had a brother that struggled with some mental health challenges and some learning challenges. And I was a top student, and almost no one knew it because I never discussed it, because I didn't want my brother to feel less than. And in order to help him feel more than, I had to temper my own accomplishments and achievements. So then, you talk about then when we're trying to go out and position ourselves for success and talk about ourselves and all those other things, that right there, right, is one thing. You talk about diving deep and talking about our childhood. As supportive as the environment was in my home, that was a message I took forward, right? So it makes it incredibly challenging. So I'm curious to know, because obviously our managers and leaders are not going to perhaps go as deep as you would go with your clients, but you're a former corporate VP, you're a coach. What can organizations, corporate leaders, and managers do that would support women's efforts to reach their highest and most rewarding potential?
Love it.
What
Thank you.
advice do you have? What could they do?
So I've written some articles, and I can certainly share them with your community about what leaders and organizations can do. But for each of these brave pathways, like Brave Sight, Brave Speak, leaders can understand that women and other underrepresented groups, this is not just women's issues, but the non-dominant group in your culture, and that's typically going to be women and other racial and other groups. For instance, leaders can make sure that people in their organizations understand what their specific talents are, encourage them to understand what skills stand out, encourage them to talk about where they want to go in the organization. Or let's say, they would love to support in a volunteer way a cause that the organization is supporting, but it would be, an extra role that they might take on. But let them understand what their specific gifts and talents are, and not hide about talking about them, and make sure those come out in regular evaluations. Don't just do one annual review. Make sure that you are talking with your people about, what do you feel gifted at? What are you passionate about? Where can we leverage those skills in a new way? Right? The second thing that comes immediately to mind is, we need mentorship and we need sponsorship. And men are, the research shows, better at identifying sponsors who are mentors, who have power, clout, who open doors for you that you can't open on your own. So organizations need to create these networks, because they don't form necessarily naturally, and particularly women, like I'll say, before COVID, when we were not remote, I'd say, if the CEO was doing a lunch and learn and you were invited, where would you sit in the room? And they always would sit in the back, sometimes not even at the table. No, sit next to the CEO. And I don't mean, can I say this, kissing up. I mean, why wouldn't you want to be near the head of the organization? And then after the program, go up and ask him or her a question. And don't just fabricate it. Hopefully you're curious. Wow, I
Yes.
found this direction that you're talking about fascinating. May I ask you a question? But in general, particularly women, we resist doing these kinds of things, and introverts have a hard time doing these kinds of things. So create sponsorship and mentorship opportunities and programs in your organization. That's just two of many, many ways
Right.
we can address these gaps.
It's interesting because I agree on sponsorship and mentorship, but particularly sponsorship because I'm sure you've had this experience. I have worked with some clients who I literally said, well, you're over mentored and under sponsored. Because sometimes if you have a sponsor that can also act as that mentor and provide that guidance, it's it's great to have mentors, but very often they don't have that power. They're not at the right level to be able to help propel you forward or identify key opportunities because they're at the table where the big
That's
conversations are having.
it.
So I always tell
So right.
people start with a mentor, but be keeping your eye on the ball because the sponsor is ultimately what you're going to need and want if you want to really continue to advance. And most of the really successful women that I have worked with have had a very, very strong sponsor. Whether it was a male or a female, they've had a strong sponsor at that level.
I couldn't agree more. You're so right.
So I want to talk a little bit more about bravery because um, you said something earlier about, you've been in the trenches, you're still in the trenches, right? You're out there as a business owner doing
True.
all these things that you're coaching people. So a lot of times, authors say that in the process of writing a book, they've learned so much from the research and their conversations. You talk about power gaps, you talk about bravery boosting paths and things like that. And I find some of the best ways we learn is when people share their real examples. So, what examples of bravery did you personally need to channel for your own career path in writing this book?
There's a million of them. I think, I'll be really transparent. Sometimes one of my challenges is I think I know an awful lot about a particular thing and we only need to hear my voice, and that's just wrong. So, one brave thing is having my own podcast as you do and reaching out to people who are literally 100 steps ahead of me, 1,000 steps ahead of me in particular areas that are critical for women's success. So, pardon me, interviewing. So what I'm proud of with this book is it features, 50 plus top experts nationally and internationally who have strategies and solutions and tips around these gaps. So one brave piece is reaching out to these people who are so far ahead that certainly don't need to be in my book, and they don't need, for their own career, they don't need to be on my podcast. They're doing it out of their own generosity. So, in the beginning, reaching out to them, would you be on my podcast? Would you be able to contribute to this book? I think that takes bravery for sure.
Absolutely, because they could say no. And sometimes, the no's hurt a little bit.
Yeah,
But if you don't ask, I always tell people, if you don't ask, you have 0% chance. If you do ask, it's 50-50, and I'll go with the 50-50 any day of the week.
that's so right. And even if they can't do it, they often send me to someone else.
Mhm.
Here's my colleague, excuse me, who's, doing amazing work in this exact field. And then sometimes that's even more fruitful. I
Mhm.
think, Regina, even believing you can have a book that will change people's lives takes bravery. And, it's interesting. I'm a writer for a living as well on Forbes and my own blog, but sitting down to write this thing, like when the first chapter was due, I was published by HarperCollins Leadership, who I love, and Murdoch Books in Australia. I would come up with any possible excuse not to sit down and write it, because you probably know exactly what I mean. Let me clean the floor, and I do not like
Yes,
to wash the floor.
suddenly.
Suddenly, my house got very clean. I think it takes courage to do this because you're forcing yourself to put all those millions of ideas that you've had about, even if you're coaching every day, you're forcing yourself to bravely identify, you can't put everything in the book. It has to be manageable. You're bravely forcing yourself to codify your own model for change.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was hard to do, and took a lot of energy. What else?
Well,
Yeah.
thank you for spending that hard work and energy in producing a fabulous book. So we are actually winding down on time. And honestly, Kathy, I could probably talk to you all day. But before we go, what would be one piece of advice that you can offer to our viewers or our listeners today?
I would remind you or tell you for the first time, you are so valuable and your talents are so needed in the world, never more than now. But I am pretty sure that more bravery and more power, and yes, I want you to think about what power means to you. It's needed. And if you have a resistance to it, I'd ask you to read the book and reframe that to understand it's the power to do what you long to do and make a difference to help others rise as you rise, which I think we all want. So please just take one step from what you hear today. One step, the step that makes you most afraid. That's where I want you to start, because that's where bravery is engaged. And you, when you do that, you're forever transformed. That would be my wish.
That is fabulous advice. And I'll tell you something, I'm thinking a little bit about what would be my step of bravery. So
Can we
that
hear it?
does, well, it's long story short, I'm wanting to flip a house.
Oh,
And
wow.
I almost purchased a flip property, but I had so many things going at the time, I pulled back. So I did not get that house. And it gave me a lot of food for thought. So the brave thing next time, which I normally do, is jump in and figure it out as I go. Because I think we are more than capable when we have a challenge in front of us that we have a passion for. So
Oh, I
that
love
is,
it. And
yes,
could it be that that really wasn't the right opportunity? Could it
it could
be that
be,
your hesitation was your higher self going, not
not this
now?
time.
Could it
But
be?
I think it's prepared me more for what I need to do potentially for the next time.
I
So
can't wait
that's,
to hear what happens, Regina.
yes,
I got a
yes.
little chill, a little
Okay.
goosebumps. Good luck. Good
Yes,
luck with
thank
that.
you. And thank you, Kathy. So that does conclude our interview with Kathy Caprino. And just a reminder, if you want to learn more about Kathy, her coaching programs, and of course her books, visit kathycaprino.com. So thank you again, Kathy, for being here. And please don't forget to visit reginabarr.com, where you can learn more about my upcoming podcasts, events, and other great programs that we have going on. So with that, thank you all for joining me and have a great day.